So what do you want me to say? What's it called again? You'll have to cut that. I'm a boy from the bush, grew up in Bourke, or was born in Bourke, grew up on a big sheep station out near Bourke, ended up in Sydney at boarding school, and then went through university and stayed in kind of the city life, if you like. Never went back to the bush. And during that journey I was part of the Norman Ross and then the Harvey Norman startup, which was the original Harvey Norman footprint as a fairly young operator, and then that led me into Burns Philp as a big corporate in those days, and then I joined Ernst & Young and then spent probably the next 30 years consulting all around the world, doing big business transformations, big changes, operated and lived in Asia and all around the world from that point of view, and then moved from EY to A.T. Kearney, to back to EY, and then to Deloitte, and spent the last 7 or 8 years at Deloitte. Part of my role at Deloitte was to disrupt Deloitte and go and change anything that would happen inside Deloitte to make it different, make it not people-based, make it technology or product-based. And then since I retired from Deloitte, I have taken on a couple of senior roles, a couple of board roles, and a whole bunch of mentoring of startups and new businesses. So currently I'm the CFO at Booktopia, which is a newly listed Australian company, and one that has spent 16 years coming from a startup to a $200 odd million business as it now stands. So that's a quick history of my background. The thinking process behind becoming a listed company is it needs to be a serious decision. There's a lot of work, and obviously to become a listed company, the ASX needs to be very comfortable that you have all the credentials right. So you need a lot of advisors, you need a lot of due diligence and technical reviews. So it's not for the faint-hearted. It's a serious activity to go through, and one that Booktopia went through in fairly fast fashion, largely because they'd attempted to do it about 4 or 5 years ago. So had a bit of a history, a bit of understanding of how to do it, but then it was more executing on that, and that's really where I came in to make sure that everything happened as planned. The reason for doing it, there's a couple of reasons. One obviously is to raise some capital. Now a lot of people use it to exit and therefore to sell out. It's probably not the best use of it, but it's done. Booktopia used it to raise capital, to continue to invest, to continue to grow, which is really a pretty noble reason to be listing. So getting the cash is good. You're able to then invest that back into the business if that's what you choose to do. But also being a listed company means that you are more regularly talked about in the AFR and the business markets. You're referred to as there's people can measure you now. You've got a share price. As a private company, people kind of don't really know who you are or what you're doing. So that concept of getting more publicity, and particularly someone like Booktopia, where that's a branding image, a branding activity, as much as it is capital raising. So it's kind of I guess a maturity. You need a certain size and certain maturity of business to be able to operate at that level. But the organisations that maybe have a couple $100 million of revenue or upwards of that sort of number could quite easily list and take advantage of their branding and the capital they raise, kind of thing. There's a bit of hype around listing at the moment, so there's a lot of organisations listing, which is fair because there's a lot of money in the market. Some people would tell you that we're in for a boom next 3 to 4 years, which is fantastic. So it's a good thing. Most companies will do okay. So it just depends what the company's trying to do. Some companies where the founders or the owners are trying to exit and they're effectively trying to cash out, they're not using the money for anything in the business. They're actually just selling their shares, is not usually a best model. It usually means that you're buying at the top of the price. Whereas somebody that might be putting the money into the company and building more assets, or and like in our case it was more automating the distribution centre, it was all that good stuff. That's the important factors to look at, and to be able to say, okay, if they're going to do that, they should be able to grow. If they can grow, then the share market, their share price should go up again. So it just depends on who the company is, but there is a lot of hype at the moment. So.
Yeah.
It's through places like Tankstream, but Stone and Chalk and other places like that. There are a number of kind of investor kind of discussions that happen quite often. So you end up in a bit of a network, and the information gets shared, and there might be a roadshow or a discussion with somebody. I've invested in Booktopia personally, as well as other companies. And there's various ways you can do that. So in some companies that I've invested in, it's been in return for my time and effort in helping them do something. So that's been the investment story. Others, it's actual cash. Others, it's lining them up with others who would be more interested in their stories. There's quite a big sort of private net wealth investor market out there. You just have to be able to tap into it effectively, kind of thing. So from a founder point of view, it's probably one of the least focused on activities. Typically a founder worries more about their product, and then a little bit about their customer base or their market, and nothing about their investor. If I was looking at it, I would say, yeah, you probably got to put them in third. So it's as important as your product, and as important as having a market or customers for it. Then is how you're actually going to fund your scaling or your growth. And that's the difference between a lot of startups who have a great product, actually have some customers and never get anywhere, and those who have actually been able to grow themselves into a proper business. So on that basis, they have to treat it. The founder has to treat investment as importantly as the product, and which is probably something that'll usually resonate with a founder, because they love their products, and being able to actually turn that thinking into, wow, I've got to put as much effort into this. So getting your ducks in a row is really going to be making sure you've got a story that resonates with the investor. Okay, it's slightly different to the customer. The customer wants to use the product. The investor wants to see the product sold to a customer. So you've got to be able to tell the story of how would that happen? What will it look like? And now typically investors or they've got advisors around them that are very au fait with financials. So you need to know your numbers. You need to know where they're going to, where your product's going to hit the market, what's your price points, how are you going to make money out of this, how are you going to turn it into something that is valuable, not only for a customer, but then valuable in terms of creating profits. A lot of technology companies or online kind of environments, which is pretty much a lot of the startups these days, is all about getting those customers. So customer acquisition, and how do you measure that? When are you going to turn that customer into a profitable situation? How are you going to manage the economics and financials of your business? And then what's your story? I can tell you probably the first 5 minutes is critical. If you can't demonstrate the passion and the belief and the understanding of who you are and what you're trying to do and why your business is going to be successful, you probably don't get beyond 5 minutes. They may listen to you, but they've switched off. So you've really got to bring that passion, that story to the table, but also demonstrate that you know the numbers and that you know how this is going to play out. A pitch is very important. Probably from a couple of perspectives. One, it forces you as the owner or the founder to get your story straight. If you can get it down onto 2 or 3 slides or 1 page, then you must have thought about it enough to be able to get it working. It's the old Mark Twain story of I didn't have enough time to write a short letter, so I wrote a really long one. So getting it short and sharp is usually a really good thing for the founder, but it also then shows the investor that you're taking it seriously and you want to have a serious conversation. So it may be more of a conversation, but the pitch thinking and the way in which that's organised is pretty critical. From an investor perspective, the belief in the person, management, the owner, the founder, is just as important as the business or the product. And that's something that you'll find investors are looking very, very early on in the relationship to try and figure out whether this person has the passion, has the ability to actually do what they're going to say. And there's a number of ways in which investors would look at that. Track record's obviously one, but just the manner in which the person engages, the follow-up, the consistency of the messaging, the story, all of those things are seriously important to getting an investor on board. And then once you're in that situation, you need to then really play through with your understanding of your product, your business, your marketplace, what you're going to do in the future. I'll call it a believable ambition. That's what I would really look for. That's what a lot of investors would be looking for. They want to know that there is an ambition and there is something that the organisation or the team are anchored around, and that they all believe in getting there. But also not just that they believe, that is actually believable to the market and the investor. Somebody saying they're going to be the next unicorn because they've dreamt up a product that is the same as 6 others is probably not going to cut it. But somebody sitting there saying, look, we're going to have the marketplace of Australia covered. We're going to grow in a certain fashion. We're going to put these products and these combinations to it where we believe we can get to this market, this size. Here's our economics and how that works. Now, a really neat way of doing that, and which is what I get a lot of the organisations I work with to do, is to really sit out 3 or 4 years, somewhere where that ambition does become real, and then describe exactly how that business is working. Even down to we sit in a room and we actually draw the org chart of the organisation in, say, 3 to 4 years' time. And we identify who's going to be doing what. And in doing so, we've understood what are the channels to market, who are our partners, what's our pricing, how do we advertise, market, brand, etc. And then we pull that all together to turn it into a story, which we can then every fortnight or month sit back and go, okay, let's pretend we're 3 years out, 4 years out now, and how do we actually get, how would we be operating? What would that look like? Let's talk about it. And the more they talk about it, the more they actually believe it, the more it becomes real, and surprisingly, they end up exactly where they say they're going to be. No. I think the only thing I really would say is that treat investing seriously. It's a core component of a startup business, or particularly a scale-up. Usually startups are funded by family and friends, but scaling up is when you get some serious money, and it's a critical step. Too many organisations that I've dealt with have been very happy to have 10 customers when they could have had 1,000. And the difference between 10 and 1,000 was funding it properly and actually capturing the growth opportunities. So it's a critical component. It's just as important as the product. It's just as important as having customers, and it really needs to be taken seriously by the whole team as they try and figure out how to make the whole success out of a business.